Welcome to Inspire Me with Jay, a podcast focusing on meditation, the near-death experience, and all things spiritual. Please like, subscribe to this channel, and share everywhere. Thank you. Hello, this is Jay Spillers with Inspire Me with Jay. I have a guest today. My guest is Diane L. Ross. How are you, Diane?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing good myself. So you have a book out. What is the name of your book and what is it about?
Well, actually, I have two books out. The first one is the first book that I wrote is called Meditations for Miracles. And that is right here. You can tell I've got it. I've been reading it. This is a book of daily meditations. And the cool thing about this book is that you only need to read one page a day. And for a lot of our youth nowadays, who are not used to reading, thinking that they only have to read one page a day is really reassuring for them. But this book is designed to help keep us on a spiritual path. It's designed to help us remember what we are. Notice I said what, not who. It's designed to help people connect with their soul self. And then my second book is called 5 Steps to Freedom. And if you go, these are both on Amazon. If you go to Amazon and you put in the titles, make sure you put in by Diane L. Ross. Otherwise, you'll get 1,000 books that come up with similar titles. So, and by the way, my brother, who is crossed over now, did the artwork for both of these books. This piece of artwork that he did is called Sunset Over the Universe. And this piece of artwork that he let me use for my book is called Chalice of Light. And so I just thought that might be a little interesting tidbit to share with your viewers.
Yeah, and I did put a link to the book on freedom in the description. I didn't know about the other book, but during the podcast, I'll put a link to the second book as well on meditation.
Oh, great.
So what is it about freedom in your book? Because you're talking about freedom to be your authentic self and to be more happy and joyous and
absolutely free to be free of the negative thinking patterns. We all have negative thinking patterns. I call it default thinking. And it's been my experience that unless we make the conscious effort to train our brain to get out of that negative thinking and into the positive thinking, then we're going to be stuck. We're going to be stuck in those negative thinking patterns because as humans, we were designed to think in a negative way. There's a book called Buddha's Brain by Rick Hanson, and he actually supports these ideas through scientific studies. And the idea is that part of our evolution was designed to require us to think in a negative way in order to survive. If you think in terms of, oh gosh, if the fire goes out, what if a lion comes up? What if? We had to be in that fight or flight state all the time in order to survive. But nowadays, hopefully we don't have lions out there chasing us. And we don't have to worry about the fire going out, hopefully. So, but we have retained this negative thinking. And there's actually a Sanskrit term for it called samskara. Think brain scar. It's like we have these negative neural pathways. And unless we train our brain to create positive neural pathways, which is what 5 Steps to Freedom is for, we're going to go back to that negative thinking. And the thing of it is, ask yourself, how do I want to feel? I don't know about you, but I don't want to feel rotten. I don't want to be depressed. I don't want to be fearful. I don't want to be angry. I want to be happy. I want to be joyous. And that's where the freedom comes in. It's like the freedom comes in when we realize that we are not stuck in those negative neural pathways, that there are ways that we can train our brain, train our mind to get into the positive neural pathways so that we feel better more than we don't. And that's what the first 5 chapters of the book outline the process. And then the rest of the book includes really kind of far out experiences, past life regressions, spiritually transformative experiences, synchronicities, and things of that nature that are designed to just kind of have fun, entertain, and there's also a chapter on addictions. So it pretty much covers the whole course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because there is so much negativity that we do. Like if a new book or a movement or any movie comes out, there's always a floodgate of negativity towards it. And I think the past couple of years, I've tried to be more positive, like stop a minute and think of, well, how can I view this positively? How can I turn it around and sort of see any positive that might be there? What are some of the ways that you can change that, turn it around from the negativity towards
Well,
a
there are
positive mindset?
actually, thank you. There are actually 5 steps. The first step is simply being aware, catching ourselves in that negative thought, being aware of, okay, what thought am I thinking? Oh, I'm thinking that if I get on the freeway, I'm going to have a flat tire. So the first step is awareness. We're just aware, okay, that's a negative thought. And then the second step is acceptance. And believe it or not, when we accept the way we feel and we allow ourselves to experience that feeling, we're actually going through part of the process that will enable us to let that go. We spend so much time in denial. We spend so much time in trying not to feel negative. And what we don't realize is that that denial is adding strength to the negative emotion. What we resist persists. So acceptance is, okay, I'm going to let myself feel angry that I might get a flat tire on the freeway. I'm just going to I'm being silly, but now I'm making a point.
Mm.
I'm going to let myself be just really angry that I'm thinking about having a flat tire on the freeway, And then the third step is to make the decision to forgive ourselves for having that negative thought. I didn't say forgive ourselves. I said make the decision to forgive ourselves for having that negative thought. All we're doing is deciding, okay, I'm going to forgive myself. And then the fourth step, and this is from my knowledge, from my experience, I'm the only one who's actually teaching this, who has actually come up with this idea. The fourth step is to love ourselves because we are experiencing the negative emotion, not in spite of, because of. Because when we love ourselves in spite of a part of ourselves, we are excluding a part of ourselves from our love. And any parts of ourselves that do not feel loved are going to come back and bite us. Because basically, that's what every negative part of ourselves is crying out for. Every part of ourselves is crying out to be loved. So the fourth step is loving myself because I have that negative emotion. And I hold myself in my arms like a little tiny baby. And that little tiny baby is me. And I tell myself, I love you because you are angry. And then I watch as that little tiny baby accepts my love and drifts off into peace. And then the fifth step, and this is the highest form of any spiritual practice, I surrender that negativity to whatever I call my higher power. It can be God, source, the universe, spirit, whatever. And then I look back on the whole process, and here we come back to step 3 again, making the decision to forgive myself. I realize there's nothing to forgive. I'm human like the rest of us. And that is true forgiveness. True forgiveness is the realization that there's nothing to forgive. And if what happens is we keep practicing these 5 steps. We keep practicing them over and over and over again. And pretty soon what happens is they get condensed. Instead of having to go through every single step, you go awareness and then love and then surrender. And what happens is, and that surrender, by the way, is letting go. You're letting go. That's how, we're taught, oh, let it go, let it go, let it go. Well, how do you do that? This is a process of learning how to let go. And then we experience that wonderful sense of relief. It's like, and that's freedom. And then we get to the point where we practice this so often that for me, what's happened is that I catch myself in a negative thought and I just start laughing. I mean, it's like, oh, here we go again. It's like you get to the point where you are in that state, in that happy neural pathway rather than in a negative neural pathway. So that the freedom is joy, bliss, happiness. I mean, to me, that's freedom. I mean, isn't that what we all want?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is kind of similar to like mindfulness meditation, where you'd have a thought that would come up, anger, negativity, fear, and you just kind of detach and observe it, and you don't pass any judgment. You just sit with it, so to speak, and it sort of takes the power away from it, and then
Exactly.
you can accept yourself where you are. And I've heard of, like showering yourself with love or showering others with love. I hadn't specifically heard of like love yourself because of that specific feeling. And I guess it kind of makes sense. Is it sort of like you see yourself on a journey and this is part of your journey, and you're just going to love yourself like you would a small child who's learning and growing, kind of
Exactly.
like that.
Exactly. And the interesting part about it is that it's easy, it's fun, you feel good. One of the things I talk about in the book, and this is what most people do not understand, and I think this is so critical to our well-being. What we think about another person, we feel. So if I'm thinking about another person in a negative way, oh, that SOB, oh, that fill in the blank, whatever negative adjective I want to apply to that person, I'm feeling that negativity. I'm the one who's feeling like an SLB, even though I'm thinking it about someone else. Because what I'm thinking about, I experience. You see? The level of manifestation is thought, feeling, action or paralysis, depending on how we respond to the thoughts. So if we think of your thoughts like a hamster on a wheel, and one revolution of that wheel is one thought, and that wheel is hooked up to a generator, and that generator is enhancing our emotions. It's powering our emotions. And the emotions are what either provoke us into action or paralyze us, depending on how we respond to the emotions. So that's why it's so important to be mindful. That's the very first step in 5 steps. Mindfulness, awareness. Oh, I'm aware I'm thinking a negative thought. If I'm not aware of it, how can I change it? If I'm not aware of it, it's got control over me. You see? So I can catch myself thinking a negative thought about someone else. And what typically happens with me now, I just start laughing. I just think, this is really funny that I'm having this thought. So you see what happens is when we laugh at ourselves, for having these negative thoughts, and it's like, we're not in a negative thought anymore. We're in a high vibration of laughter. It's the same with love. That's why loving ourselves because of whatever it is that we're feeling that is negative, that we don't like about ourselves. We love ourselves because of that negative feeling that we have, that negative thought that we have. Then what's happened is we've interrupted that pattern. We've interrupted that hamster on the wheel. If we don't interrupt that hamster on the wheel, what happens is, because of the law of attraction, that negative thought will attract another negative thought, attract another negative thought, attract, and pretty soon we're deeply ingrained in this negative neural pathway. It's habitual. It's a habit. We automatically, that's why I call it default thinking. We naturally go back to this negative neural pathway unless we interrupt the pattern. And that's what we're doing. We're catching ourselves, we're being mindful, and then we become aware, we accept the negative emotion, and it goes beyond acceptance. We let ourselves feel it. Feelings won't hurt you. See, we have been taught to be afraid of how we feel. Feelings won't hurt us. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to take action. It's the people who take action on their negative feelings that get in trouble. But if I let myself feel it, and then I make the decision to forgive myself, and then I love myself because I'm experiencing the negative feeling, and then I give it to God. You see how quickly that happens? I mean, it's like, boom, boom. It can happen way faster than I can say it. It takes me longer to say it than it does to, it's almost instantaneous. So that we're interrupting that pattern. Instead of that negative thought attracting another negative thought, attracting another negative thought, and going to that negative neural pathway, we're going, wait, stop. Feel, love, let go. You see?
Mm-hmm. You think a lot of times people feel so angry at others or judgmental of others is because they see something in that other person that they see in themselves, like maybe not identical, but we have done that, we do that, or we have done that in our past or something, and we're really responding to ourselves in that person. That person's bringing out something we dislike in ourselves.
Exactly.
And that, when you start to, yeah, because when you start to do that, the judgments go away.
Yes, exactly. And that's why self-love is critical. And that's why self-forgiveness is critical. I think that self-forgiveness is the highest form of love that we can experience during this earthly realm, time, during our earthly time in this realm. And what I mean by self-love is not self-indulgence. Self-love is being able to love ourselves because of our negativities, not in spite of. And what happens is, you brought up a really major point. What happens is that if we don't love ourselves, if we have parts of ourselves that are running around under the surface, creating this havoc, those are the types of things that we project onto others, and we don't like them for, or we judge them for. You're exactly right. They're qualities within us that we have not embraced, loved, and forgiven. So we project them out on others. Well, I'm perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with me. But look at that so-and-so, That's exactly what we do.
Mm-hmm. So how do you start to practice that? Do you do this within meditation? Do you sit down or in the morning and journal, or how are some of the ways that you can start to incorporate this in your living, in your life?
Excellent point. Yes, I journal every morning. I meditate night and day. In the evening and at night. And right now, my meditation has been to focus on the lessons in A Course in Miracles, I don't know. I also teach A Course in Miracles. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's actually channeled information, and it's been called the most important spiritual literature of the 20th century. It was actually channeled by two professors at Columbia University in New York City, beginning in 1965. One of the professors actually did the channeling, and then the other one, they combined their efforts and published this amazing book. But when I first started meditating many years ago, back in 1970, I did a meditation that I have modified because I've learned so much more since then. I have actually modified that meditation. It's now available in an MP3 called Instant Meditation. It's available on my website, DianeRoss.com. And when I first started meditating, this is absolutely true. I know this is going to sound mind-boggling by today's standards, but I did a very similar meditation as my instant meditation. And I did that meditation 3 times a day, a 20-minute meditation, 3 times a day, religiously for 7 years. I missed one meditation in that 7-year period. And it was so traumatic for me that I missed that meditation. I can tell you the meditation that I missed. Now, I'm not telling people that they have to be that rigid. I mean, I look back and I think that was pretty rigid. But you know what? It got me through college and working. I was, at the time, I was going to college full time, and I was working part time to put myself through college. I didn't know about student loans or scholarships or any of that stuff, which is probably a good thing. I'd probably still be paying out my student loan. But I got through college by working part-time. And you think, okay, so I was going to college full-time, I was working part-time, and I still managed to meditate 20 minutes at a time, 3 times a day. How is that possible? And I think back on that time period and I think, you know what? It was a real gift, because when I was studying, my attention developed into like a laser. I mean, I became so focused. I was able to focus my attention so intently that when I was reading, I was reading. You know what I mean? My mind wasn't all over the place. I highly, highly recommend that people start practicing a meditation that they practice on a daily basis. It doesn't need to be 20 minutes. It doesn't need to be 3 times a day. Even if we meditate once a day for 10 minutes, when I'm talking about meditating, I'm talking about the kind of meditation that is a focused point, where we focus our attention on typically something that represents the divine to us. And then when our attention wanders off, we gently bring it back. That's called a focused meditation. And what happens is that we learn to become more aware of our thoughts. And as we learn to become more aware of that's just one side effect. We learn to become more aware of our thoughts. We catch the negative thinking before it's completely controlled our lives, and we're miserable. We're unhappy. We're fearful. We're depressed. We're discouraged. We're in despair. Because we don't know how to get out of that negative neural pathway. We identify with the negativities. We think, oh, I am depressed. I am sad. What if we looked at it in a different way? What if we looked at it like, there is a part of me that is experiencing depression. There is a part of me that is experiencing sadness. I own that. I can experience the depression. I can experience the sadness, but that's not me. That's not my identity. That's not who I am. You see, and by practicing a meditation on a regular basis, we're going to become more aware of our thoughts so that we can more quickly get out of the negative neural pathway and into the positive neural pathway. Another thing that I do that has been extremely helpful for me is you can call it journaling, you can call it writing, you can call it channeling. but I write every morning, circumstances permitting. Now, that actually is how I wrote my first book, Meditations for Miracles. A really interesting story. I had writer's block. I had writer's block. And I had been a newspaper editor, associate editor at a newspaper in Arkansas. And then I was a reporter and what they call a desk editor for a daily paper in Hot Springs, Arkansas. So, I mean, I was a professional writer. I had also taught school, high school reading, high school English for 7 years. So, long story short, I developed writer's block. And I was like, and I knew in my heart for years and years, I knew that I was a writer and that I was going to write a book. So I'm also a full-time hypnotist, right? I help people with this kind of thing. I do all kinds of spiritual work and helping people be their best selves and so forth. So I was working with a client. This is back in, I think it was 1999. And she spontaneously connected with I call it a group of wisdom, my group of elders on the other side. And she was telling me that they were telling her to tell me, why wasn't I doing what I was supposed to be doing? Why wasn't I doing it? Why wasn't I writing my book? Why wasn't I? And I'm like, oh my gosh. And she said, and they're telling her this stuff from the realms of beyond the veil. They're telling her, she knows what she needs to be doing. Why isn't she doing it? And it freaked me out, really. You know what I mean? It's like, oh my gosh, I guess I really do have to do this. But I had writer's block, right? So it was like, well, how's this going to work? And then I remembered a couple things. One of them was when I was in graduate school at Cal State Long Beach in 1970, would have been 70, early 70s. When I was in graduate school. One of the things that we do as graduate students is when we have speakers, people would come to the college. And of course, you've got free labor, right? Your grad students. So it was part of the free labor. We had to set up chairs, blow up balloons, get the place ready for our speaker, who was Ray Bradbury. Ray Bradbury is a very well-known science fiction writer. And I don't know how many people are aware of him now, but he's a prolific writer. I mean, he's written, I don't know how many books and hundreds of short stories. And so here we are setting up the room, putting chairs in place. And I happened to look over into the next room and there's Ray Bradbury. And he was alone. And I thought, I'm going to go talk to him, So I did. I went over there and I introduced myself and he was very kind, very down to earth. And I asked him, I said, how do you do it? How do you write all these wonderful books and short stories? And he said, every day I take a blank sheet of paper and I put that sheet of paper in my typewriter. Back then, we had typewriters. We didn't have computers. He said, I put it in my typewriter and he says, I type 1 page a day. And he said, and at the end of the year, I've got a book. And I never forgot that. And so here I am with my writer's block and I'm thinking 1 page a day. And that's how I started. And I would do it in the morning and I would go into, and this wasn't even on purpose. I didn't even do this intentionally, but I found myself going into a very meditative state. And words would just come to me. I wasn't consciously thinking of anything, but these words would come to me. And I wrote 1 page a day. And another thing too was because of my writer's block. I was a perfectionist. I've also been in recovery from drugs and alcohol it'll be 40 years this November. So I was in that early stage of recovery, where I was paranoid And you know, I was paranoid and a perfectionist, and boy, there were a lot of things I gave up besides booze and drugs. But I gave myself permission to do a C job, which for me was like, I mean, I was, graduated cum laude. For me to do a C job, no, that's not acceptable. But I did. I gave myself permission to do a C job, and I wrote 1 page a day. And I never looked at what I wrote because I knew if I started editing, I'd be in trouble. I wrote for 3 years. I did miss a couple days in that 3-year period, but at the end of the 3 years, I had like 1,000 pages. Right? I had over 1,000 pages. And I didn't know at the time I was writing a book of meditations. I was just writing to get over my writer's block. And what resulted after that 3-year period was this book, Meditations for Miracles. So of course, then I did go back and I culled out the 360, I actually have 366 pages in this book because I figured somebody was born on February 29th, right? And how horrible it would be not to be able to find your birthday in a book of meditations. So I included February 29th so that who's ever born on that day can find their birthday meditation. But, it's like whatever spiritual practice works for you, that's the important thing. I mean, I can tell you what I do, but if it doesn't resonate with you, throw it out the window. Another thing I do, which is extremely grounding, is I go outside. I go outdoors. I'm a gardener, and I just have a little backyard. But I go outside. See, I live in Florida, so I can go outside pretty much year round, barefoot. And that going outside, that being with the plants, that being with the trees, it's like we pick up on the earth's resonance. We entrain our bodies and our minds and our feelings with the resonance of the earth so that we are truly grounded. So that, I firmly believe in being grounded enough so that we can have a spiritual life. Because a spiritual life, being able to channel, being able to be in communion with those who crossed over, with the saints, the angels, and all that. It's in my humble opinion, is not going to do me any good if I'm not grounded. My feeling is if I can't apply my spiritual life to my daily life, if there's no practical application, it just doesn't resonate with me. And for me, the practical application is being happy, being joyful, being able to deal with the traumas and the dramas of daily life with as much peace as possible, with as much harmony and balance as possible. Because we're not going to escape drama. We're not going to escape trauma. And it doesn't have to be ours. It can be our families or our friends. But I don't think that we're ever going to escape it. So my thinking is, why not learn to handle it in a way that is helpful, that doesn't turn your life upside down? So those are my
with writing. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say those are my recommendations. Meditate, journal, go outside, whatever works for you.
Well, then, like writing 1 page a day, you may end up going and writing 10 or 20 or 30 pages, but you're only locked into 1 page, which seems like, oh, well, that seems doable. And
Exactly.
do you find a lot of times that when you start, you end up doing a lot more than, the 1 page anyway?
Well, that's what happened with my second book, 5 Steps to Freedom. That's what happened with this book, because I kind of got into that routine of writing every 1 page every day. But when I got into this book, 5 Steps to Freedom, it was like that's when I started writing more than 1 page a day. And I had this. It was like an urgency. It's hard to describe with Meditations for Miracles, it was all kind of it was like natural, and I'm going to use the word easy. I mean, it was easy. There was no stress involved. It was just like I was just in the flow. And now mind you, I called out 366 meditations out of 1,000. So I mean, they're not all good. They're not
Mm.
all publish worthy, and that's okay. But with 5 steps to freedom, I had this, I felt this urgency to get this material out as soon as possible. Because what happens is that when we become balanced and happy and joyful, and we become aware of how to get ourselves out of that negative neural pathway, out of that default thinking, it's like when we learn how to do it, then it's like something magical happens. It's like we want to be a blessing to others. It's like love naturally expands. That's the way love's energy works. Love naturally expands. Fear naturally contracts. So being in this state of love, which is freedom, I felt compelled to help others. It's like, oh, this is so cool. I want to share this. So I did write more than 1 page a day, although not the way that I wrote Meditations for Miracles. It was more of a very light. I hate to use the word trance state, because I wasn't in a trance in terms of, I mean, I was totally aware of what was going on around me. And I was able to, accomplish what I was doing and still write down the information that was coming through me. And like I said, it was easy. It was natural. It was, the hard part was getting the book together. But with 5 steps, it was like I had stories to tell, and I felt compelled. It's like, because 5 steps to freedom is not only the process of letting go of negative thinking patterns, and connecting with joy and with bliss and with happiness. There's also stories in there, past life regression stories, stories of addiction, stories of synchronicities. I call them God signs, and I felt like I just felt compelled to get this information out quickly. And so I worked, in addition to beginning the writing every day, in the morning before I went about my business of meditating and all that. Actually, I meditated first. I mean, a formal meditation. I did formal meditation first. But that's when I actually sat down and, put the information in the computer and did the editing and did the tweaking and, got it into the format and everything. I was not in what we would call a meditative state when I did that. You know what I mean? I mean, that's where we call it beta level consciousness, the critical mind. That's where the critical mind comes in and helped me with all that. But so that was a combination of both. That was a combination of writing in I hate to call it meditative state, semi-meditative state, and also engaging my critical mind at the same time. So I was using the best of both worlds.
So, like, you were influenced by A Course in Miracles. I
Absolutely.
haven't really studied it extensively, but everything I've heard about it, it always sounds very similar to what, like, if you study the near-death experience, some of the things that you would hear there.
Absolutely. And I think that the near-death experiences, which I've not had a near-death experience, but I have had many, many spiritually transformative experiences, which can occur in meditation, in hypnosis, past life regressions, meeting your guides, your angels, and things of that nature. The similarity between A Course in Miracles and those kind of experiences is that A Course in Miracles was channeled. A lady named Helen Schuckman, who is one of the professors back at Columbia University, heard this voice in her mind. That's what she called it, the voice. And really interesting way that got started. She and Bill Thetford, he was head of the department that she went to work for. And she was an older, when I say older, I mean like she was like 45 or so when she got her PhD, and she went to work for Bill Thetford in this psychology department at Columbia University Medical School. And they were butting heads all the time. They were fighting all the time. They could not get along. And the whole department was like that. The whole department was just like, they could not get along. There was tension, divisiveness, the whole bit, arguing. And so one day Bill and Helen were talking, and Bill said, "There's got to be a better way." And Helen said, "And I will help you find it." And not long after that, a voice started speaking to her in her mind's eye. And she took down every word the voice said verbatim in her own shorthand. And the voice was really interesting because when she would get interrupted for some reason, the voice could stop in mid-sentence. And then when she was able to take dictation again, the voice picked up exactly where it left off. So what happened was they developed this routine, and Helen would record the voice in her shorthand at night or whenever she received the information. And then she and Bill agreed to show up an hour early every morning at work. And she would read to Bill what she had written the night before, and he would type it like in triplicate, carbon copy on the typewriter. Young people don't even know what a carbon copy is, on the typewriter. And then, so they would go in every morning and she would read to him and he would type it up. And what resulted was what is called A Course in Miracles. It's actually 3 books in one. And it really inspired me because it is so different. It's so different than what we are taught in the worldly world. It talks like my book, 5 Steps to Freedom, and Meditations for Miracles is also inspired by the Course. Because when we channel information, whoever channels the information is channeled through the lens of the person who's doing the channeling. So, for example, A Course in Miracles wouldn't be channeled through someone who doesn't like to read. You know what I mean? It just wouldn't happen because they wouldn't be at that vibration. Helen Schuckman was a Shakespeare fan. She loved Shakespeare. She was very well educated. So it was like, so the Course, which was channeled through her, is written in almost Shakespearean language. And so a lot of people find it very difficult to read. And so that's why they go to teachers, of which I am one. I was an English major. I love Shakespeare and I love the language. To me, it's easy to read. So what I help people do is I help people understand what the Course says. But in those 2 instances, the idea of being channeled and then having a near-death experience or a spiritually transformative experience, those are the similarities that the Course has, and that NDEs and spiritually transformative experiences. It's like the information comes not from us, but through us. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like sometimes you can in meditation sort of communicate or commune with God, and God can speak to you. Sometimes I know, like in the past, seemed like a separate voice outside of me, but then over the past few years, it's just been sort of my own voice coming up, and it's obviously being filtered through me. But it's kind of a similar thing where you're sort of connecting. If you are a religious or spiritual person and you have a question, you can kind of commune in your meditation and maybe get some clarity and direction on
Absolutely.
something?
Absolutely. And the trick is, the key is to be quiet enough inside of ourselves to have that quiet, still place so that we can receive information from the other side, or from the other realms. You know, if our mind is like this all the time, there's no room, there's no space. You know, we can't do it. So that's another reason that meditation is so important, so that we quiet our mind, so that we can
Mhm.
receive.
When you meditate, do you tend to be in total silence or do you use meditation music of some sort?
No, no, no. I think that that is a myth. Um, the kind of meditation, so there's so many different kinds of meditation, but the kind of meditation that is designed to be practiced on a daily basis, uh, the instant meditation, which is what I've entitled the meditation that I teach, that I share with others. It's not a matter of controlling the mind. It's a matter of not letting the mind control you. So we go into kind of the observer state. We go into the, oh, there's a thought. Oh yeah, there's a thought. Oh yeah, there's another thought. So we learn to become the detached observer, so that we become aware of our thoughts without identifying with them. And what happens over time, it sounds really boring, but it's not.
Mm.
What happens over time is that we learn to identify with what we are. We become aware that we are not our thoughts. That's what scares people. People get scared when they have negative thoughts because they identify with the thoughts. And they, oh my God, you know, I don't want to think that because I don't want to do that. Those are the people who go out and have temper tantrums. And, you know, those are, in my opinion, those are the people who go on shooting sprees and kill people. And think of it like this. We have a negative thought, right? We don't want to think that thought. It's unpleasant. It's uncomfortable. We don't want to think that thought. So what we do is, it's like a steel spring, and we're constantly pushing down on this no. We're saying no. We're saying no. Well, every time we say no, we're giving it energy. What we resist persists. Close your eyes for a minute. I'll give you an example. Okay, now Jay, do not think of a candy bar. Open your eyes. What's the first thing that popped in your mind?
I thought of a Baby Ruth candy bar.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah. Mm.
Exactly. Exactly. That's what I mean by what we say no to, we give power to. Oh, I'm not going to think about fill in the blank. Well, we're putting that thought in our mind, you see? So it's like a steel spring. We're constantly giving energy to those negative thoughts. No, I'm not going to think it. I'm not going to. And then pretty soon we can't hold it down anymore. We let go and boing, that steel spring goes up and chaos results. Whereas if we allowed ourselves to be aware of the negative thought that we have, we just look at it mindful, right? We're just being mindful. Oh yeah, there's negative thought. And then we accept it, which is the second step. It's like, okay, I'm going to feel this. I'm going to feel this negativity, whatever it is. And then you see, I'm not saying no to it. I'm saying yes to it. I'm saying yes to the feeling. That doesn't mean I'm going to act out on it. See, I'm just saying yes to the feeling. And then I make the decision to forgive myself. It's like, because you know what? We know that our ideal self, we know that our higher self, we know that the best image that we have of ourselves does not think negative thoughts, right? So we forgive ourselves. We make the decision, well, I'm going to forgive myself for having that thought. And then I'm going to love myself because of that negative thought. I'm going to hold myself in my arms like a little tiny baby. And that little tiny baby is me. And that little tiny baby is crying with negativity. Oh, I hate so and so. I'm so mad. I'm so depressed. I'm so angry. I'm so blah, blah. Ah. I love myself because I feel that way. And then that part of me that's all flipped out in negativity is like, huh? You love me because? And it's like, oh, 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 okay. I'm going to accept your love. And guess what? When we accept our love, we are at peace. You see? Because every negative part of ourselves is really a cry for love, for
Mhm.
our love. So when I give myself that love, the issue is gone. And then the final step, surrender, letting go. I give that negativity to, I call it God, source, universe, spirit, whatever you want to call it. And it's like, then I feel the relief. It's like the release of letting go. It's like, and with practice, what happens is that relief turns to bliss. It's like that release of letting go. Finally, our channel becomes so clear. We become such a clear channel that we can feel the divine energy that I believe we are. That if God created us and God is love, then love must have created us. So we must be love, right? I mean, it's logical.
Mhm.
So if my true nature is love, when I get rid of the debris, when I love the debris and I let the debris go, then what am I left with? I'm left with love. And that's bliss. That's joy. That's freedom.
Mhm. So, if people want to get in touch with you, where can they get in touch with you?
My website, it's dianeross.com, which is DIANEROSS.com. That's my website. My books are on there. I have recordings that are on there. I also teach a class on Zoom once a month. If they want to give me their email, they can email me at Diane, DIANE, at dianeross.com. Send me an email. Just say, hey, I'd like to sign up for your email list. And then I will put them on my email list and send them out notifications and about sessions that I do online. The one I have coming up it's always the last Tuesday of every month. It's 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern time. It's $15. So, I mean, it's not going to break the bank. And I sell tickets on Eventbrite, or also if some people don't want to go on Eventbrite, that's fine. I take PayPal, Zelle, Cash App. I mean, you can send me an email and we can make other arrangements. But I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. Every month is a different session online, but every month involves going into a meditative state or a state of hypnosis. This coming February 28th, I'm doing Have You Had an ET Encounter?
Mhm.
And we're going to go back or have you had episodes of missing time? Or times you can't account for? You would be amazed at how fabulous it is to be connected to people who have had these extraordinary experiences, and many of them have happened spontaneously while in hypnosis with me. That's how one of my clients had a very first encounter with an otherworldly creature when he was having a hypnosis session with me. They just kind of came in, and said, "Here we are. Pay attention." But
Hmm.
every month it's different. But it's a way of allowing yourself to experience things that are not normally available for us to experience in this realm, in the earthly realm. It's DianeRoss.com.
Is there one last final word you'd like to leave the audience before we close out today?
Thank you. Yes, I would like to remind everyone that they are a beautiful, eternal soul, and that they are goodness, they are light. There's nothing that they can do to damage their soul, that regardless of what they've done or thought about doing, that they are a holy, beautiful, brilliant light. And nothing can change that. Nothing can damage that light. Nothing can darken that light. It's just a matter of remembering what they are and connecting and identifying with their true nature, which is pure love. Thank you,
Yeah, well,
Jay.
thank you for that. Thank you for that word, and thanks for coming on today. It was a pleasure to have you.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. This has been great fun.
I spent several years of my life stressed, anxious, and depressed. I needed to find something that would make my life work. For me, that was meditation. With meditation, I found the peace of mind that I was looking for. I found the happiness, and I found a way to improve every area of my life, my emotional life, my spiritual life, my relationships. I was able to discover things about myself. I can give you the tools to meditate. I will walk you through the process and hold your hand. Whether you're a beginner to meditation who's never meditated, or whether you're someone who's tried meditation and it just never seemed to work, we can make it work. Meditation is something that everyone can do, and I can show you how. Check out my course on meditation.